The warning had been there longer than any living civilization could remember, etched into the oldest navigational archives and repeated in every known language that had ever reached the stars. It was not a suggestion, not a guideline, not a negotiable boundary. It was absolute. Do not enter. Do not engage. The system itself had no official name on most charts anymore. It had been redacted, classified, erased in places where curiosity tended to grow into something dangerous. But among traders, smugglers, and those who listened a little too closely to forbidden frequencies, it was still whispered about in hushed tones. A dead system. A quarantine system. A system that had been locked away for 300 years. The reasons varied depending on who you asked. Some said it was cursed, a place where an ancient war had fractured reality itself. Others claimed it housed a species so violent that the wider galaxy had agreed, unanimously, to leave it alone. There were even those who believed it was empty, that the warning existed only to keep others away from something hidden in the dark. What was consistent, however, was the fear. Entire fleets had altered course to avoid even drifting too close to its outer boundary. Automated probes sent toward its edge had a habit of going silent without explanation. Long-range sensors picked up nothing but cold silence and scattered debris, as if the system itself had chosen to hold its breath. And for 3 centuries the galaxy had listened. Until the Velthari Dominion decided they wouldn't. Their fleets did not creep or hesitate. They arrived in formation, precise and deliberate, tearing through the edge of the system's boundary like a blade through silk. Dozens of warships, each one a masterpiece of luminous design, their hulls glowing with layered energy matrices that shimmered like liquid light against the void. At the center of the formation, the flagship hung like a silent verdict. Vast, elegant, and impossibly advanced, its surface pulsed with controlled power, its weapons dormant but ready, its shields humming with quiet superiority. On the observation deck, High Commander Serac watched the stars shift as the fleet advanced deeper into the Forbidden Zone. His posture was relaxed, almost bored, as if this entire operation were nothing more than a routine acquisition. "Confirm boundary breach," he said, his voice calm, measured. A subordinate inclined her head, fingers gliding across a translucent interface. "Boundary crossed, Commander. No resistance detected. No signals. No defensive platforms." Serac allowed himself the faintest smile. Of course there isn't. The silence of the system stretched out before them, vast and empty. No patrols. No warnings. No signs of life beyond the faint, distant glow of a yellow star. For something so feared it looked insignificant. "Long-range scans," Serac continued. "What do we have?" "Minimal activity," the officer replied. "Several planetary bodies. Resource-rich asteroid belts. Trace atmospheric signatures on the third planet from the star. Industrial markers are primitive." A ripple of quiet amusement passed through the bridge. Primitive. The word settled comfortably in the air. Serac stepped closer to the viewing pane, his reflection merging with the distant light of the system's star. "So this is what the Council quarantined for 300 years, he murmured. "A developing species barely capable of leaving its own gravity well. They were classified as volatile," another officer added. "Self-destructive tendencies. Nuclear conflict in early development stages. And yet they survived," Serac said. "How disappointing." He turned, hands clasped behind his back, eyes sharp with quiet calculation. "Resource projections?" "Exceptional," came the immediate response. "Rare metals, dense mineral fields, unclaimed orbital infrastructure potential. The system alone could supply the Dominion's expansion for centuries. That was all that mattered. Not the warning. Not the myths. Not the silence. Just value." "Open a channel on all frequencies," Serac ordered. "Standard acquisition protocol." The communications officer hesitated, just briefly. "Commander, there has been no attempt at contact from within the system. It's possible they are unaware of." "They will become aware," Serac interrupted. The channel opened. Across the empty void, the Dominion's signal spread outward, powerful and impossible to ignore. "This system is now under the authority of the Velthari Dominion," Serac said, his voice transmitted with absolute clarity. "All local inhabitants are ordered to cease all activity and prepare for integration. Resistance will be considered a forfeiture of biological and territorial rights." The words echoed into silence. No response. No hesitation. No acknowledgement. Serac's expression didn't change, but something in the stillness felt wrong. "Repeat the transmission," he said. The message was sent again, stronger this time, layered with encoded authority markers recognized across half the galaxy. Still nothing. No signals. No movement. No defensive activation. Just silence. A deeper, heavier silence than before. One of the sensor officers frowned, adjusting his display. "Commander, I'm detecting something." Serac didn't look away from the void. "Report." "It's faint. Extremely low energy output. Near the outer debris field." The officer leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "It's artificial." A single point appeared on the tactical display. Small. Insignificant. Barely registering against the vastness of space. Serac finally turned his attention to it. "Magnify." The image expanded, resolving into the crude shape of a structure. Angular, functional, and undeniably primitive. No glowing energy fields. No elegant design. Just metal, exposed framework, and minimal heat output. An outpost. A listening station, perhaps. Alone. Watching. "Is that their defense?" someone muttered. A few quiet chuckles followed. Serac studied it for a moment longer, then exhaled slowly. "Pathetic." "Shall we eliminate it?" the weapons officer asked. Serac tilted his head slightly, considering. "No. Not yet." He stepped forward, gaze fixed on the tiny structure hanging in the darkness. "Let them see us," he said. "Let them understand what is coming." Behind him, the fleet continued its advance, engines glowing brighter as they pushed deeper into the system, their formation tightening, their presence growing impossible to ignore. The outpost did not move. It did not power up. It did not run. It simply watched. And somewhere in the cold silence between the stars, something shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a system waking up after a very long sleep. Serac didn't notice. But he would. Soon enough. The outpost responded. Not with weapons. Not with movement. Not even with fear. Just a signal. It cut cleanly through the Dominion's broadcast like a blade through silk, forcing its way onto every screen, every channel, every system the Veltari fleet controlled. Their firewalls didn't stop it. Their encryption didn't slow it. It simply appeared. On the main display, the image stabilized. A human. No elaborate armor. No glowing enhancements. Just a worn uniform, a dimly lit command room behind him, and eyes that carried none of the panic Serac had expected. "Unidentified fleet," the man said, voice steady, almost calm. "You have entered restricted space." Pause. No fear. No hesitation. Serac felt a flicker of irritation. "This is High Commander Serac of the Veltari Dominion," he replied, stepping forward. "You are addressing a superior authority. Your system has been claimed. Power down all installations and prepare for integration." The human didn't react the way lesser species usually did. No visible stress. No rush to comply. Instead, he leaned slightly closer to the camera, studying Serac like one might study a problem already solved. "Negative," the human said. One word. Flat. Final. A few officers on the bridge exchanged glances, unsure if they had heard correctly. Serac's expression hardened. "You misunderstand your situation." "No," the human replied quietly. "You misunderstand yours." The air on the bridge shifted. Something about the tone, not defiant, not emotional, just certain. Serac clasped his hands behind his back, posture straightening. "You are a developing species with primitive infrastructure and minimal orbital presence. You have no fleet, no defensive grid, and no strategic allies. Your refusal changes nothing." The human held his gaze. "For 300 years, he said slowly, no one crossed this line." Another pause. "And you didn't ask why." A faint murmur moved through the Veltari bridge crew. Serac ignored it. "You were quarantined," he said. "Contained. Isolated because your species posed a risk to itself. The Council preserved this system out of convenience, nothing more." The human's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything friendly. "Is that what they told you?" Serac felt the irritation sharpen. "It is what is recorded." "Then your records are incomplete." Silence stretched for a moment. The human straightened, the dim lighting of his command center flickering slightly as if power was being rerouted somewhere unseen. "This is your only warning," he said. "Turn your fleet around. Leave this system. Do not return." A beat. Serac let out a quiet breath, something close to a laugh. "A warning?" he repeated. "From a species that cannot even project power beyond its own orbit?" He gestured toward the tactical display, where the tiny outpost icon blinked weakly against the overwhelming presence of the Dominion fleet. That station alone represents your entire defense capability, Serac continued. It will not survive the next 60 seconds. The human didn't look back at it. Didn't even glance. Probably not, he said. That answer made several officers pause. Serac's eyes narrowed slightly. You accept your destruction so easily? The human shook his head once. No, he said. I accept yours. The bridge went quiet. Completely quiet. For just a fraction of a second, something unfamiliar brushed against Serac's thoughts. Not fear. Not doubt. Just friction. Then it was gone. He turned sharply toward the weapons officer. Target the outpost, he ordered. Primary battery. Minimal charge. I want it erased. Target locked, the officer confirmed instantly. Firing solution ready. Serac gave a single, dismissive nod. Fire. Outside, the flagship's forward arrays ignited. A beam of concentrated energy formed, brilliant and precise, cutting through the void toward the distant outpost. It moved faster than any projectile, a line of pure destructive force meant to end the conversation in an instant. On the screen, the human didn't flinch. Didn't look away. The beam struck. For a moment, the outpost was swallowed in light, its crude structure outlined in blinding energy as the Dominion's weapons slammed into it with overwhelming force. Then the shields, if they could even be called that, collapsed almost immediately. The structure buckled. Metal warped. Sections of the station vaporized as the beam carved through it. On the bridge, several officers relaxed, the outcome exactly as expected. Primitive. Fragile. Predictable. Serac watched the destruction with quiet satisfaction. End transmission, he said. But the human was still there. Still on the screen. The feed hadn't cut. Static flickered around the edges, the image distorting slightly, but the man remained standing in the dim command room, as if the destruction outside meant nothing at all. That was your first mistake, the human said. Serac's eyes snapped back to the display. What? You assumed that was a defense platform. The outpost, now little more than a burning wreck, began to break apart, fragments drifting outward into the surrounding void. For a brief moment, nothing else happened. Then the sensor officer stiffened. Commander. Serac didn't look away from the screen. Report. I'm detecting anomalies, the officer said, voice tightening. Multiple points. Low energy. Extremely low. How many? Pause. Then. I don't know. They weren't there before. The tactical display flickered. One new contact appeared. Then another. Then 5. Then 20. They weren't moving like ships. They weren't emitting standard propulsion signatures. They were just there. Cold. Dark. Invisible until they chose not to be. The human's voice cut through the rising tension. You're not the first to come here thinking we were weak, he said. Just the first in a long time. Serac felt it then. Not fear. Not yet. But something was definitely wrong. Very wrong. Commander, the sensor officer whispered, panic starting to bleed through discipline. Those aren't debris signatures. The display continued to populate. Dozens. Then hundreds. All around them. Hidden in the darkness they had assumed was empty. The human leaned slightly closer to the camera, his voice dropping into something colder. You should have listened, he said. And for the first time since entering the system, the Velthari Dominion fleet realized. They were not alone. The first volley didn't come from the darkness. It came from the Dominion. Target all contacts, Serac snapped, his voice cutting through the rising tension like a blade. Fire at will. The hesitation on the bridge vanished. Training took over. Dozens of Velthari warships adjusted formation in perfect synchronization, their luminous hulls flaring brighter as weapon systems charged. Multiple targets locked. Energy matrices stabilizing. Firing. The void erupted. Streams of coherent light and superheated plasma lanced outward in precise arcs, striking the newly revealed contacts before they could fully register on the tactical display. The beams cut through space with surgical accuracy, each shot capable of vaporizing anything short of a capital-class warship. And they hit. One after another. Direct impacts. The cold, dark shapes scattered throughout the debris field were engulfed in light as Dominion firepower slammed into them. Explosions followed, violent, expanding bursts of fragmented metal and vaporized material. Targets destroyed, the weapons officer reported immediately. Minimal resistance. A ripple of relief moved across the bridge. Serac didn't smile, but the tension in his posture eased slightly. See, one of the officers muttered under his breath. Ambush tactics. crude and ineffective. Serac kept his eyes on the display. The contacts were disappearing. Fast. Too fast. Confirm all kills, he said. The sensor officer hesitated. Working. Pause. Then. Commander, those weren't powered vessels. Serac's eyes narrowed. Explain. They had no active systems. No engines. No weapons. Just mass. Before anyone could process that, the first impact came. Not from the front. Not from the sides. From everywhere. A Valkyrie cruiser on the outer edge of the formation suddenly jolted violently, its elegant hull crumpling inward as something massive struck it at impossible speed. There was no warning, no visible projectile, just the sudden, catastrophic deformation of metal and energy fields. What was that? Someone shouted. Another impact. A frigate spun wildly as a dense chunk of metal tore through its midsection, bypassing its shields entirely. The protective energy flared for a fraction of a second, then failed as if it had nothing to interact with. Shields didn't register the contact, the defense officer yelled. It's not energy, it's... A third hit. This time the flagship's display caught it. A dark object. Irregular. Cold. Moving at a fraction of light speed. It slammed into a destroyer, punching straight through its hull, exiting the other side in a spray of molten debris and atmosphere. The ship didn't explode immediately. It simply came apart, systems failing faster than they could respond. Silence lasted less than a second. Then chaos erupted. Multiple kinetic impacts. They're using debris as weapons. Velocity readings are off the scale. Serac stepped forward, eyes locked on the tactical display as it flooded with red. Track the source, he ordered sharply. We can't, the sensor officer shouted back. There's no propulsion signatures. They were already in motion. We didn't see them because they weren't emitting anything. Another cruiser vanished from the formation, torn apart by a barrage of high-velocity impacts that bypassed its shields like they didn't exist. Serac's mind raced. Cold mass. No emissions. No warning. They seeded the field, he muttered. The realization hit like a physical blow. The debris around the outpost. The empty space they had flown into. It wasn't empty. It had been prepared. For 300 years, Serac whispered. A violent explosion snapped his attention back to the present. One of the larger Dominion warships detonated as multiple impacts breached its reactor core, the resulting blast sending shockwaves through nearby vessels. Break formation. Serac commanded instantly. Scatter. Reduce target density. But it was already too late for some. The tight, disciplined formation that had been their strength was now a liability. Ships too close together were being hit in rapid succession, each impact creating secondary debris that became new projectiles. Commander, we're taking heavy losses. How many? I don't have an exact count. Another impact rocked the flagship, not a direct hit but close enough that the shockwave rattled the entire structure. Lights flickered. Systems momentarily faltered. For the first time, Serac felt it clearly. Not confusion. Not irritation. Fear. Return fire, he shouted. Clear the field. We can't target them, the weapons officer snapped. They're not ships, they're just mass. There's nothing to lock onto. More impacts. More destruction. The elegant, glowing fleet of the Valkyrie Dominion was being torn apart by invisible, silent projectiles that ignored every defensive system they had. On the main screen the human reappeared. Not distorted. Not interrupted. Watching. You rely on energy, the human said, his voice cutting cleanly through the chaos. Heat. Radiation. Signals. Another cruiser broke apart behind him on the tactical display. We learned a long time ago, he continued almost conversationally, that energy can be disrupted. Serac stared at him, fury beginning to burn through the fear. What have you done? The human's expression didn't change. We stopped playing your game. Another impact struck dangerously close to the flagship, sending a violent shudder through the bridge. Several officers stumbled, one collapsing as a console exploded in a shower of sparks. Commander, hull integrity is holding but we can't stay here, the defense officer warned. We're sitting targets. Serac clenched his jaw, every instinct screaming to regain control of the situation. Plot a course out of the debris field, he ordered. Full thrust. We regroup and re-engage at range. Yes, Commander. The fleet began to break apart, ships accelerating in different vectors, trying to escape the deadly zone of prepositioned projectiles. Some made it. Many didn't. As the flagship surged forward, Narrowly avoiding another high-velocity mass strike, Serac looked back at the display one last time. The human was still there. Still watching. This was just the outer perimeter, he said quietly. Serac's stomach tightened. What? The human tilted his head slightly. You're not even close yet. The transmission cut. And ahead of them, deeper within the system, something massive began to wake. Deep beneath the surface of the third planet, far below oceans, cities, and layers of reinforced bedrock, the war room had no windows. It didn't need them. Every inch of the chamber was alive with data, holographic projections, tactical overlays, real-time telemetry streaming in from every corner of the system. The room pulsed with controlled urgency, not panic. Every movement was precise, every voice measured. At the center of it all stood Admiral Elias Ward. He didn't speak as the final moments of Outpost Kestrel played across the main display. The station's destruction unfolded in cold clarity, impact, fragmentation, silence. No one in the room reacted outwardly. They had expected it. Telemetry confirmed, an officer reported. All data packets received before signal loss. Enemy weapon systems, shield harmonics, propulsion signatures, full capture. Ward gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Commander Hale completed his objective, he said. There was no ceremony. No pause for grief. Just acknowledgement. Another screen shifted, replacing the destroyed outpost with a tactical map of the outer system. Red markers, Velthari fleet signatures, flickered erratically as they struggled through the debris field. Enemy formation disrupted, a strategist noted. Kinetic minefield effective beyond projections. Initial losses estimated at 20% and climbing. Adjust that to 30, another voice added. Secondary debris cascade is amplifying impact velocity. Ward stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the battlefield. Good, he said quietly. Not satisfaction. Confirmation. For 3 centuries, he continued, we prepared for this exact scenario. With a subtle gesture, he activated a deeper layer of the system map. The room shifted. What had appeared, moments ago, as a mostly empty solar system transformed into something else entirely. Markers lit up. Hundreds at first. Then thousands. Hidden installations embedded within asteroid belts. Cold silent platforms buried beneath planetary crusts. Dormant fleets tucked inside hollowed moons, masked by layers of engineered interference. An entire war machine invisible until now. We were never quarantined, Ward said. We were contained. A low murmur moved through the room, not of surprise, but of recognition. They thought isolation would weaken us, he continued. They thought time would erase us. Another gesture. More systems came online. Across the map, green markers began shifting to active status. Power signatures rose from 0 to operational in controlled increments, each activation carefully timed, carefully hidden until the exact moment it was needed. They were wrong. A communications officer looked up. Admiral long-range sensors confirmed the Velthari fleet is attempting to withdraw from the outer perimeter. They're breaking formation. Of course they are, Ward said. They've realized the first layer wasn't random. He turned slightly, addressing the entire room now. Layer 1 was designed to teach them a lesson. A beat. Layer 2 is designed to make sure they don't survive it. Silence followed. Then, activate Archon Grid, Ward ordered. Across the system, something shifted. In the asteroid belt beyond the outer planets, massive chunks of rock began to move, not drifting, not colliding randomly but repositioning with deliberate precision. Thrusters long dormant ignited in short, controlled bursts, adjusting trajectories calculated decades in advance. Hidden within them, massive structures unfolded. Rail platforms. Magnetic accelerators. Weapons that had never been seen by anyone outside this room. Archon Grid online, a technician confirmed. All firing solutions synchronized. Ward nodded once. Hold fire. The order surprised no one. Timing was everything. Another officer spoke up. Admiral, inner system defenses are requesting authorization to power up. If the Velthari push inward. They will, Ward interrupted. They won't retreat. Not fully. He glanced at the tactical display, watching the scattered red markers stabilize, regrouping just beyond the worst of the debris field. They're predators, he said. They test. They adapt. They push again. A faint, humorless smile touched the corner of his mouth. So do we. A new signal pinged. Admiral, the communications officer said, turning. We're receiving a targeted transmission. Direct channel. It's the Velthary flagship. Ward didn't hesitate. Put it through. The main display shifted. High Commander Serac appeared again, but he was different now. The comm superiority was gone. In its place, focus, calculation, and something else buried just beneath the surface. You planned this, Serac said immediately. No formalities. No pretense. The debris field. The hidden assets. The timing. Ward met his gaze evenly. Yes. Pause. Serac studied him, eyes narrowing. You sacrificed that outpost to draw us in. Yes. No hesitation. No apology. Something in Serac's expression hardened. You are willing to destroy your own to achieve tactical advantage. Ward's voice didn't change. We are willing to do what is necessary to survive. The words hung in the air, heavier than any threat. For a moment, neither side spoke. Then Serac exhaled slowly. You've made your point, he said. Your system is not defenseless. Your tactics are unconventional. Another pause. Withdraw your forces, Serac continued. Stand down your weapons. The Dominion is prepared to reassess this acquisition. In the war room, no one moved. No one reacted. Ward looked at him, expression unreadable. No, he said. Serac's jaw tightened. You cannot win this, he said. Your technology is inferior. Your infrastructure is limited to a single system. Even if you destroy this fleet, others will come. Ward stepped closer to the display. Then we'll destroy them too. The simplicity of the answer landed harder than any elaborate threat. Serac's eyes flickered just briefly. You're choosing annihilation. Ward shook his head once. No, he said. We're choosing to stop hiding. He turned slightly, glancing at the tactical display where more and more human assets were coming online, their signatures rising like a tide. For 300 years we stayed inside this system, Ward continued. We listened. We watched. We learned. He looked back at Serac. You think this is all we built? The question lingered. Unanswered. Uncomfortable. Behind Serac, on the Velthary bridge, officers were beginning to notice the same thing the humans already knew. The map was changing. Not just in the outer system, but everywhere. New contacts. New signatures. Not drifting. Not passive. Active. Waiting. Serac's voice dropped slightly. What are you hiding? Ward's expression didn't shift. You're about to find out. He raised a hand. In the war room, dozens of officers moved at once. Admiral, one of them asked. Ward didn't look away from the screen. Bring the fleet online, he said. Across the solar system, the silence finally broke. Engines ignited. Massive, armored warships detached from their hidden docks, emerging from beneath planetary surfaces, from within asteroid shells, from the frozen depths of distant moons. They didn't glow. They didn't shine. They moved like shadows given form, cold, heavy, and built for one purpose. War. Full system activation confirmed, the operations officer reported, voice steady despite the scale of it. All sectors green. Awaiting engagement orders. Ward lowered his hand. Let them come, he said. And for the first time since the Velthary fleet had crossed the boundary, the balance of power shifted completely. The first human ship didn't fire. That was what confused the Zendari commanders the most. For 12 full seconds after emerging from slip space, the forward elements of the United Earth fleet simply drifted, cold, silent, and unreadable. No targeting locks. No energy spikes. No formation alignment. Just hundreds of warships hanging in the void like predators holding their breath before the strike. Inside the orbital ring, panic began to ripple through the Zendari command lattice. They are not forming attack vectors. Why are their emissions so low? Are their sensors damaged? High Director Zyler leaned forward in his command throne, his four hands tightening against the polished obsidian surface. This wasn't how war started. Not in the Orion Arm. Not between civilized powers. Battles were announced through posture, through formation symmetry, through energy signatures that declared intent. But the humans had arrived like chaos itself. Maintain defensive posture, Zyler ordered, forcing calm into his voice. They will reveal their strategy. On the outer edge of the battlefield, Captain Paul Evans finally moved. Signal the line, he said quietly. Across the human fleet, a single encrypted burst transmitted simultaneously to every ship. No dramatic countdown. No speech. Just a data packet. Execute. The stillness shattered. Human ships surged forward, not in formation but in controlled disarray. Frigates broke off at impossible angles, their engines flaring in short, violent bursts. Destroyers cut across vectors that made no tactical sense in Zendari doctrine. Cruisers advanced unevenly, overlapping each other's firing lanes in what looked like pure disorder. To the Zendari it was madness. To Evans it was precision. Fire at will. The first volley wasn't energy. It was metal. Railguns across the fleet thundered to life, hurling dense tungsten slugs at relativistic speeds. There were no glowing beams, no elegant arcs of plasma. Just invisible death crossing the void faster than most targeting systems could compensate for. The orbital ring shuddered as the first impacts landed. Zendari shields flared brilliantly, then flickered. Impossible, one of the Zendari tacticians whispered. Kinetic projectiles? At this scale? Their shields had been designed to disperse energy, to refract plasma and absorb radiation. But solid mass moving at those velocities didn't dissipate cleanly. It punched. It crushed. It overwhelmed. Sections of the ring began to deform under the barrage. Return fire. Xyler screamed. The ring answered. Thousands of plasma batteries ignited in unison, filling space with searing violet beams. The void lit up like a burning web as energy lanced toward the advancing human fleet. And for a moment, it looked like the humans had made a fatal mistake. Several frigates were caught instantly, their hulls boiling under concentrated fire. One destroyer vanished in a bloom of superheated gas. Another spun out of control, its engines gutted. But the rest kept coming. They are not breaking formation, a Zendari officer shouted. They don't have a formation, another replied, voice trembling. That was the problem. Human ships didn't move as a single organism. They moved as hundreds of independent hunters, each captain making micro-adjustments, each AI recalculating trajectories in real time. They weaved through the plasma storm, taking losses, but never slowing. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Evans watched the casualty feed scroll across his display. He didn't react. Adjust vectors, he said calmly. Close distance to optimal engagement range. Sir, we are taking heavy fire. I am aware. His eyes remained locked on the orbital ring. Keep moving. Behind the first wave, the heavier human cruisers advanced. Unlike the smaller ships, they didn't dodge. They endured. Massive slabs of composite armor absorbed glancing plasma strikes, their surfaces glowing red-hot under sustained bombardment. Point defense systems roared to life, intercepting incoming projectiles and debris. And from their spinal mounts, the largest railguns in the fleet began to charge. Target structural nodes, Evans ordered. Synchronize fire. Across dozens of heavy cruisers, targeting solutions aligned in perfect unison. Then they fired. The impact was catastrophic. Entire sections of the orbital ring buckled as coordinated kinetic strikes hit the same within milliseconds of each other. The structure, designed to withstand prolonged sieges, wasn't built for this kind of focused physical punishment. Cracks began to spread. Massive, jagged fractures tore through the once impenetrable fortress. Inside the Zendari command center, alarms screamed. Structural integrity dropping. Sections 12 through 19 compromised. We are losing cohesion. Xyler's confidence began to fracture along with the ring. This is impossible, he hissed. Our defenses are absolute. But even as he spoke, another synchronized volley slammed into the ring, widening the damage. Out in the void, the human fleet pressed the advantage. Frigates slipped through the growing gaps, diving into the defensive perimeter. At close range, their weapons became even more devastating. Gatling cannons spat streams of high-velocity rounds, shredding exposed systems and tearing through weakened armor. Zendari cruisers moved to intercept. Sleek, elegant warships armed with advanced plasma arrays and energy lances surged forward in tight, disciplined formations. For the first time, the battle became personal. At point-blank range, technology met brutality. A Zendari dreadnought fired a concentrated beam that sliced clean through a human destroyer, cutting it in half in a flash of white heat. But a heartbeat later, 3 human frigates flanked it, their railguns firing in rapid succession. The first slug punched through its shields. The second shattered its hull. The third detonated its reactor. The alien ship died in silence. All across the battlefield, similar exchanges played out. Elegant ships, built on centuries of refined engineering, fell to crude, overwhelming force. Human vessels, scarred and burning, kept fighting long after they should have been destroyed. They don't disengage, a Zendari officer whispered, horror creeping into his voice. They don't retreat. On the Vengeance, Evans finally allowed himself a thin smile. Of course we don't, he murmured. This wasn't a battle for territory. This was a reckoning. Status of the ether cannon? He asked. Specialist Cross's hands flew across her console. Charging sequence at 80%, sir. They're preparing to fire again. Evans nodded once. Good. Around him, the bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. Good. He leaned forward slightly, eyes gleaming with cold intent. Let them fire. Because this time, humanity was ready. Inside the orbital ring, the ether cannon completed another rotation cycle. Its containment rings spun faster now, forcing unstable white energy into a coherent beam profile. The entire northern segment of the structure trembled under the strain. Power was being pulled from every available station. Plasma batteries dimmed, shield generators rerouted, entire districts of the Zendari ecumenopolis below flickering as orbital demand bled planetary reserves dry. High Director Zyler watched it all unfold with a tightening in his chest that he refused to call fear. This weapon has never failed, he said almost to himself. A tactician beside him didn't look away from the battlefield display. It was never tested against a force that refuses to behave predictably. Zyler snapped his head toward him. All warfare is predictable. It is mathematics. It is doctrine. The tactician hesitated. Then the humans are an error in the equation, sir. Outside the ring, the error was closing in. Captain Evans stood motionless on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching the ether cannon's energy spike climb toward critical. Range? He asked. Still outside effective beam envelope, Specialist Cross replied. But sir, the charge curve is stabilizing faster than expected. They've optimized the containment harmonics. Evans nodded once. They learned. Pause. So did we. On the forward holoscreen, the ether cannon's targeting reticle shifted. Sir, Cross said quickly, it's locking onto US retribution again. Evans didn't react immediately. His eyes tracked the movement of the fleet like he was reading a familiar pattern rather than a battlefield. Retribution is still combat capable? Yes, she said. But its armor integrity is compromised from earlier plasma exposure. If it takes another direct hit. It won't, Evans interrupted. He straightened slightly. Signal Task Group Black Line. Across the battlefield, 3 human vessels responded. They were not the largest ships, not the fastest, not even the most heavily armored. But they were strange in a way the Zendari hadn't yet understood. Their hulls were asymmetrical. Their signatures unstable. Their drive trails inconsistent, as if they existed half a second out of sync with normal space. Zendari sensors struggled to maintain a stable lock. What are those ships? Zyler demanded. Unknown configuration, came the reply. They are not standard fleet design. They appear retrofitted. Evans' voice cut through the comms. Drone assets prepare for terminal insertion. Inside the 3 captured Zendari superfreighters, dormant systems awakened. They had once been civilian vessels, vast carriers designed for interstellar trade between corporate worlds. Now their interiors were hollowed out, stripped to skeletal frameworks and filled with dense, unstable cargo. Nuclear isotopes, industrial slag, reactor waste, fragmented mass designed not for elegance, but for annihilation. Each freighter's AI awakened without ceremony. No personality, no hesitation, just instruction. Go. Microjump calibration complete, Cross reported. They are locked onto target coordinates. Ether cannon still charging, Evans said. 60 seconds to full discharge. For the first time since the battle began, he looked almost satisfied. Then we are on time. Zendari plasma batteries adjusted their aim, sensing something approaching from the outer edge of detection range. Those freighters are still advancing, a commander said. Do they intend to ram us? A subordinate shook his head. No crew signature. No life support. They are empty shells. Then they are decoys, Zyler said sharply. But even as he spoke, the 3 freighters vanished. Not exploded. Not destroyed. They simply stopped being where they were. A ripple passed through space, subtle, almost imperceptible. Then they reappeared. Exactly 10,000 kilometers closer. Inside the orbital defensive envelope. Directly aligned with the ether cannon's physical structure. For half a second, the universe seemed to hesitate. Zendari sensors screamed in overload. Impossible displacement. FTL transition detected inside shield perimeter. They bypassed everything. Zyler rose from his seat. Intercept them. He never finished the order. The first freighter re-entered normal space inside the outer maintenance lattice of the ether cannon. The second embedded itself through the containment ring support struts. The third arrived directly within the cannon's energy core housing. 3 impossible points of intersection. 3 violations of structural reality. And then physics corrected itself. Violently. Matter rejected matter. Space screamed as overlapping mass tried to exist in the same coordinates. Structural bonds failed at every level simultaneously, atomic, molecular, mechanical. The ether cannon did not explode like a weapon. It unmade itself. A blinding sphere of white and violet distortion expanded outward as containment fields collapsed into cascading failure states. The nuclear payloads inside the freighters ignited not as detonations, but as chained reactions of total energetic release. For a fraction of a moment, a second sun bloomed inside orbit. The orbital ring vanished in segments. Entire platforms vaporized instantly. Shield generators overloaded and shattered. Plasma batteries detonated in sympathetic cascades, each explosion feeding the next. A 100-mile section of the ring simply ceased to exist. No debris field. No remnants. Only absence. On the Vengeance, alarms howled as shockwaves tore through nearby space. Ether cannon destroyed. Cross shouted over the chaos. Orbital integrity collapsing across multiple sectors. Evans didn't raise his voice. Good, he said. The battlefield shifted instantly. Zendari fleets, once anchored by the cannon's overwhelming deterrence, broke formation in panic. Some attempted retreat vectors. Others tried to regroup defensively. Most simply froze as their command structure failed to adapt fast enough to the new reality. Human ships surged forward like a tide released from restraint. Now, Evans said quietly, we take the ring apart. Railguns flared again. But this time, there was no coordinated defense strong enough to respond. No superweapon to stabilize the battlefield. No central authority dictating the flow of war. Just broken resistance. And humanity advancing into the gap. The collapse of the ether cannon did not end the battle. It changed its shape. Where once there had been a coordinated Zendari defensive lattice, there was now fragmentation. Fleets breaking into isolated pockets, command relays failing in cascading silence, and the orbital ring itself disintegrating into unstable arcs of burning debris. Yet even in collapse, the Zendari did not immediately surrender. Old doctrines died hard. Reform perimeter clusters, shouted one surviving fleet admiral across a fragmented channel. Fall back to secondary shield nodes. We hold the inner ring at all costs. But the inner ring was already burning. Human cruisers had slipped through the breach like blades through torn fabric. They were no longer engaging from range. The battle had compressed. Warships now fought at distances measured in kilometers instead of light seconds. Point defense systems screamed continuously as incoming fire turned space into a chaotic storm of kinetic slugs and fragmented plasma bursts. A Zendari cruiser attempted to pivot into firing position. It never completed the maneuver. 2 human frigates crossed its vector simultaneously, their railguns firing in staggered sequence. The first shot stripped its forward shields. The second tore through its midsection. The third ignited its reactor core. The ship folded inward and vanished in a silent detonation of compressed light. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Evans watched the tactical display narrow into clusters of red and blue fragments. Enemy cohesion at 12%, Specialist Cross reported. Their formation is dissolving into independent groups. Evans nodded slightly. They're adapting too slowly. Pause. That's expected. Cross glanced at him. Sir? Their remaining dreadnoughts are regrouping near the planetary equator. It looks like they're preparing a final defensive stand over the capital spire. Evans' eyes shifted. The holomap zoomed in. Zendari Prime rotated slowly beneath the battlefield, its surface a sprawling nightmare of vertical megastructures and glowing transit veins. At its center rose the corporate spire, an artificial mountain of obsidian and light, reaching from ground to stratosphere. And above it, the last concentration of Zendari power. High Director Zyler is still alive, Cross added quietly. Evans didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the cluster of remaining ships. What are they protecting now? He asked. Cross hesitated. Their command structure. Their governance core. Civil administrative systems. If that falls, their entire planetary economy collapses. Evans exhaled once. So that's the heart. He leaned slightly forward. Then we take it. Outside, Zendari dreadnoughts formed their final wall. Massive ships, older, heavier, built for endurance rather than speed, rotated into overlapping defensive arcs. Their shields linked, creating a layered barrier of shimmering violet energy above the planet. A final attempt at stability. A final refusal to fall. Human fleet approaching inner defensive cluster, Cross said. Let them see us coming, Evans replied. Zendari commanders braced as human ships advanced without hesitation. But this time something was different. The humans were not scattering. They were converging. Frigates, destroyers, cruisers, all adjusting vectors toward a single point above the capital spire. Not random. Not chaotic. Focused. Are they forming a spearhead? One Zendari officer asked. No, another said, voice trembling. They are forming a lock. The meaning of it hit too late. The human fleet was not trying to break the defensive wall piece by piece. They were preparing to punch through it as a single unified strike. Concentrate all fire on their center mass. Xyler ordered from the planetary command tower. Do not let them stabilize formation. Plasma batteries fired in unison. The sky above Zendari Prime became a screaming lattice of violet destruction. Human ships began to fall. One frigate vanished instantly under concentrated fire. A destroyer broke apart mid-vector, its hull peeling away like scorched metal paper. Another cruiser lost its forward section entirely but continued accelerating, burning itself forward on pure inertia. Still, the formation held. Impact in 20 seconds, Cross said. Evans finally spoke. Trigger convergence protocol. Across the fleet, hidden systems activated. Ships that had been operating independently for the entire battle suddenly began transmitting synchronization bursts, not targeting data, not firing solutions, but something deeper. Trajectory alignment. Mass coordination. A shared moment in space. Zendari sensors detected it immediately. They are synchronizing their movement patterns, a tactician shouted. All remaining vessels, adjust intercept vectors. But it was already too late. The human spearhead compressed, and then collapsed inward. For a brief instant, hundreds of warships became one object in motion. A single kinetic event. They hit the Zendari defensive wall at full convergence. The impact was not a collision. It was an execution. Shield layers shattered in sequence, each one failing milliseconds after the last. The concentrated mass of human fleet momentum punched through the barrier like it was not there, carving a clean rupture directly through the orbital defense cluster. Zendari dreadnoughts were torn apart in cascading destruction. Entire formation lines vanished. The sky above the capital spire turned into falling fire. Inside the planetary command tower, Xyler staggered back. No, he whispered. That level of coordination is not possible. No fleet can. The transmission cut as the impact wave reached the upper atmosphere. Human ships broke through. The path to the surface was open. The atmosphere above Zendari Prime ignited. Not from fire in the traditional sense but from the sheer violence of entry. Human drop vessels punched through the collapsing remnants of orbital defense, trailing incandescent scars across the sky. Dozens became hundreds, then thousands. Black specks against a burning violet horizon, each one carrying a payload of disciplined destruction. Inside them the Marines sat in silence. No chanting. No fear. No confusion. Just waiting. Major James Cole stood in the lead drop pod of the assault wave. His exo-armor locked around him with hydraulic precision, each plate sealing with a soft mechanical click. The interior of his visor reflected the red descent warning lights. Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds, the system announced. Cole flexed his gauntlet hand once. Outside, Zendari anti-air systems attempted a final response. Plasma flak erupted from the surface in desperate, scattered bursts. Some pods were struck mid-descent, vaporizing instantly in silent flashes. Others were thrown off course, spiraling into burning debris fields. But the majority kept falling. Enemy ground defenses are saturating, a Marine voice reported over comms. Heavy resistance expected at landing zones. Cole's response was calm. Expected is fine. Pause. Unprepared is not. The drop pods hit lower atmosphere. Heat built along their hulls, glowing orange-white as friction screamed across reinforced plating. The cityscape of Zendari Prime expanded below them, a colossal maze of towers, bridges, and luminous transit arteries stretching beyond the horizon. A world built entirely upward. A world that had never expected invasion from above its own sky. Inside the planetary command tower, High Director Xyler watched the descent unfold in horror. They're targeting the spire, he said. They're all targeting the spire. Elite corporate guard units rushed into position inside the upper floors. heavy plasma rifles, reinforced barricades, automated defense turrets powered from internal grid lines. Every layer of protection the Zendari had ever deemed necessary was activated at once. But panic made it inefficient, and efficiency had always been their strength. Until now. "Intercept landing zones," shouted a security commander. "Do not allow them to consolidate." Outside, the first drop pod struck the outer districts. Impact was immediate and absolute. Sealed doors exploded outward. Streets buckled under kinetic shockwaves. Armored Marines deployed in perfect timing, breaching charges detonating as they hit ground, turning fortified entry points into collapsing ruins in seconds. Zendari defenders rushed to respond. They were met with precision. Human rifles fired in controlled bursts, each shot calculated, each movement deliberate. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation, no emotional escalation, just function. A Zendari security squad rounded a corridor corner and opened fire. The human Marines were already gone from that position. In their place, a shaped explosive detonated, erasing the corridor in a controlled collapse. "Clear," a Marine voice said calmly over comms. Block by block, the city began to fall into segmented control zones. Above it all, Major Cole's drop pod hit the Spire district. The impact cracked the reinforced landing pad beneath him, sending fractures spiderwebbing through alloy plating. Steam and dust erupted upward as the pod's doors blew outward. Cole stepped out. The air was thick with smoke and burning particulate matter. Alarms echoed through the upper levels of the corporate spire. Emergency lighting pulsed in erratic patterns, casting everything in fractured red and white shadows. Ahead of him, a Zendari defensive line formed. Corporate elite guards. High-tier security. Heavy plasma repeaters aimed in trembling hands. They were not soldiers. Not really. They were protectors of a system that had never been challenged at its core. "Hold position," one of them shouted, voice cracking. "You are not authorized to." Cole raised his rifle. He didn't speak. The first shot dropped the speaker instantly. The second shot triggered the rest. The corridor erupted into violence. Plasma fire lit the hallway in chaotic bursts, splashing against Cole's armor and detonating in harmless bursts of light. He moved forward through it anyway, each step heavy, deliberate, unstoppable. Behind him, Marines poured into the spire entrance. "Sector secured," one of them reported. Advancing upward. Cole continued walking. He didn't run. He didn't rush. There was no need. The defenders were already falling back. Inside the tower, Zyler backed away from the central command console. "They're inside," he whispered. A subordinate turned toward him. "Hi, Director, we can still initiate planetary evacuation protocols." "We can." "We cannot escape this," Zyler said quietly. Another explosion echoed from below. Closer. He turned toward the holographic emergency channel, hands shaking as he attempted to initiate contact. "Envoy Kale. Council forces. Anyone?" Static. Then silence. The humans had already cut the spire off from external communication. Cole's footsteps echoed closer through the upper corridor. Measured. Inevitable. Zyler stood alone now at the heart of his empire. And for the first time since the war began, there was no system left to obey. The upper levels of the corporate spire were no longer a command structure. They were a tomb with working lights. Emergency systems still functioned. Air recycling, gravity stabilization, redundant power grids, but none of it mattered anymore. The Zendari ascendancy still existed on paper, still had protocols, still had hierarchy. But outside the sealed command corridors, those concepts were dissolving in real time. Major Cole moved through the final security corridor without slowing. The resistance had thinned. Not because the defenders had stopped fighting, but because they were running out of places to stand and call it resistance. Behind him, the human Marines advanced in disciplined silence. No shouting. No celebratory chatter. Only tactical updates passed in clipped, efficient bursts. Third floor secured. Internal defense grid offline. Enemy command trace isolated to apex chamber. Cole lifted his hand slightly. The Marines stopped. He didn't look back. "Hold perimeter," he ordered. They obeyed instantly. The corridor ahead of him was empty now. Not clean. Empty. There is a difference. The walls were scorched from plasma discharge. The floor was cracked where shaped charges had torn through earlier barricades. The air still carried the metallic sting of burnt alloy and ionized dust. Cole walked alone toward the final doors. Zendari architecture always favored symbolism. The doors ahead were not just functional, they were ceremonial. Massive black alloy slabs engraved with glowing corporate lineage sigils, pulsing faintly with residual energy from the planetary grid. Behind them, High Director Xyler. And everything he had ever controlled. Cole stopped in front of the doors. For a moment there was silence. Inside the chamber, Xyler stood frozen at the center of his command dais. He could hear them. Every step. Every breath of the humans outside. One of his aides collapsed near a console, whispering, "We should surrender again, formally, through proper channels." Xyler didn't respond. Proper channels no longer existed. The system had already been overwritten. The doors trembled. Not from pressure. From charges placed precisely along their structural seams. A controlled breach. A lesson in inevitability. Xyler finally spoke, voice low. "We offered them trade rights. Integration. Representation." No one answered him. Outside, Cole raised his fist. A single gesture. The charges detonated. The doors didn't open. They ceased to be doors. Light and smoke flooded the chamber as armored fragments flew inward, embedding themselves into the walls with violent precision. The sound followed half a second later, a crushing, concussive roar that swallowed the entire room. When the dust settled, Major Cole stepped through the breach. Behind him, 2 Marines took position at the threshold. No one else entered. This was not a battle anymore. It was an accounting. The chamber was vast, circular, and designed to impress. A panoramic view of Zendari Prime's burning skyline stretched beyond reinforced glass. The collapsing orbital debris still rained faint trails of fire across the horizon. High Director Xyler stood alone in the center. No guards. No advisors. No escape routes. Only him. And the human soldier walking toward him. "You are," Xyler began, voice trembling but trying to recover its authority, "a violation of interstellar statute. You have committed acts of..." Cole stopped a few meters away. He didn't raise his weapon. That was worse. Because it meant he didn't need to. "We read your statutes," Cole said. His voice was distorted by the armor, but steady underneath it. Xyler blinked. "Then you understand the consequences of illegal occupation." Cole tilted his head slightly. "We understand your rules." Pause. "We just stopped playing by them when they stopped applying to us." Xyler's hands tightened. "You think this makes you above law?" Cole took one step forward. "No." Another step. "It means your law was never designed for someone who refuses to lose." The room felt smaller now. Not physically, but psychologically, as if every exit had quietly disappeared. Xyler's voice cracked slightly. "We are offering surrender again. Full corporate transfer. Amnesty provisions. Wealth. Technology. Anything." Cole finally stopped directly in front of him. He looked down slightly, not as an insult, but because he physically had to. "We didn't come here for what you're offering." A long silence. Outside the glass, another Zendari station broke apart in orbit. A silent bloom of destruction illuminated the chamber in pale flashes. Cole continued. "We came here because you thought distance made you safe." Xyler swallowed hard. "We didn't." Cole interrupted him, quieter now. "You turned our world into a resource line on a ledger." Pause. "And you forgot something." Xyler didn't speak. Cole leaned forward just slightly. "Humans remember ledgers." For the first time, Xyler looked afraid in a way that had nothing to do with weapons or armies. Because this wasn't rage. It was certainty. Cole stepped back half a pace. "Secure him," he said over comms. Behind him, Marines moved in. Xyler didn't resist. Not because he was compliant, but because there was nothing left that resistance could attach itself to. As restraints locked onto his wrists, the High Director looked past Cole, past the soldiers, past the burning sky, toward the collapsing remains of his civilization. "You've destroyed an empire," he whispered. Cole turned slightly toward him. "No." Pause. "We repossessed it." And with that, the chamber fell silent, except for the distant sound of a world continuing to fall apart without permission. The silence after Xyler's capture did not feel like victory. It felt like finality. Across Zendari Prime, resistance had not so much ended as it had simply run out of structures to exist inside. Command nodes were gone. Orbital coordination was broken. The corporate hierarchy that had once defined every decision across the ecumenopolis now existed only as scattered fragments of disconnected systems trying to remember how to be an empire. And failing. On the upper spire, Major Cole stood at the panoramic command glass, watching the burning remains of orbital infrastructure fall through the atmosphere like dying stars. Behind him, High Director Xyler was being processed by Marine containment teams. No ceremony. No spectacle. Just procedure. The same way everything had been done since the beginning of the invasion. Efficient. Unemotional. Final. Captain Evans' voice came through Cole's comms. Spire secured? Cole didn't look away from the glass. Confirmed. Pause. Planetary surface? Contained, Cole replied. Another pause, longer this time. Casualty report? Cole finally glanced down at the shattered horizon. Zendari military structure is gone, he said. Remaining resistance is fragmented civilian security. No coordinated threat detected. On the other end, Evans was quiet for a moment. Then, good. Not relief. Just acknowledgement. In orbit, the Vengeance hung above the broken ring structure like a judge over a collapsed courtroom. Human fleets were already moving through the debris fields, salvaging intact stations, locking down industrial cores, mapping data vaults that still functioned beneath emergency power. Not destruction anymore. Administration. On the bridge, Evans studied the tactical overlay one last time. The battlefield was no longer a battlefield. It was a system being rewritten. Status of external councils? He asked. Specialist Cross answered immediately. Council Armada has fully withdrawn from Zendari space. No re-engagement detected. Long-range scans indicate rapid diplomatic signal traffic, panic responses across multiple sectors. Evans nodded once. They understand now, he said. Cross hesitated. Sir, do we pursue? That question lingered in the air longer than any weapons discharge had during the entire campaign. Evans finally turned slightly. No. Cross blinked. No. He shook his head once. We don't chase fleets. We don't chase fear. Pause. We just make sure they never forget what it cost them to look at us the wrong way. Back on Zendari Prime, the capital spire's emergency lighting stabilized into a steady, subdued glow. Human engineers were already inside the system grids, rerouting planetary infrastructure. Power distribution nodes were being reassigned. Communication relays were being rewritten. Industrial sectors were being cataloged and locked under new access authority protocols. Zendari officials who had surrendered were being processed, not executed, not dismissed, but absorbed into controlled administrative oversight. Their knowledge of the system was too valuable to discard. Major Cole finally turned away from the glass. One of the Marines approached. Command requests final confirmation of occupation status. Cole nodded slightly. Transmit it. He walked toward the central spire console, placed his hand on the interface, and authorized the final sequence. Across Zendari Prime, every remaining system received the same override. A single designation replaced all former identifiers. United Earth Provisional Administration Grid, Orion Theater Authority active. The planet did not protest. It could not. In orbit, the last fragments of the ether cannon drifted silently, cooling into inert ruin. The orbital ring, once a symbol of absolute dominance, was now a broken arc of debris slowly being captured into controlled decay trajectories. And beyond it, human fleets held position like a reminder. Not occupying. Not retreating. Just present. On the Vengeance, Evans stood alone for a moment, looking at the darkened horizon of space. They thought we were trapped, he said quietly. Cross replied, Sir? He didn't look at her. They gave us isolation, Evans said. 300 years of it. A faint, almost invisible smile formed on his face. We used every second. Behind him, the ship's systems continued their steady reports. Sector stabilization, asset control, compliance indexing, reconstruction protocols. The war had ended. But something larger had replaced it. A precedent. And as Zendari Prime fell fully under human control, one truth spread across the Orion arm faster than any fleet could travel. Humanity did not arrive as a conqueror. They arrived as a correction.